digital agency. I'm based here in Toronto along with Amanda and Mark, but Nonlinear has offices spread across Canada, the US, and Brazil. It's my great pleasure today to actually be your host for what promises to be a really interesting, informative session by Mark and Amanda, and help us to understand how SickKids Foundation relaunched their website in using this idea of a digital hub. And I think that that's a really exciting concept and one that we've heard a lot about, and we're really excited to hear from Mark and Amanda how that actually translates in practice with a real-world example. And with no further ado, I want to introduce Mark Jordan. Mark is the Director of Client Services for Brand and Marketing and Communication at the SickKids Foundation. And Mark, if you just spend a second or two and tell everyone a little bit about your background, that'd be great.
Absolutely. So I've been at SickKids Foundation for just over 3 years. As you mentioned, I'm on the brand marketing and communications team, and my mandate when I started was really to look at the digital space that we were in at the time and start to establish some of the foundation for our digital efforts. And what I'm going to take you through today is a bit of a story on the journey that we've been on and kind of where we're going to from here.
That's excellent. Amanda Shiga. Amanda is the Vice President here at Nonlinear Digital. Amanda, a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I've been at Nonlinear for about 9 years and have been inside our Sitecore practice. And my background is as a developer, and now I kind of talk about all things Sitecore. And I am looking forward today to sharing, after we hear from Mark, sharing a bit of a broader sense of specifically around customer experience platforms and Sitecore and what value they can add to the nonprofit sector specifically. So I'll be talking about four key points and weaving in a couple of the client work pieces that we've done as well.
Great, thanks. So the way this is going to go today is, I think, Mark, you're going to start off and lead off and give us a little bit of a background and context around SickKids Foundation, where you were before and what that journey looked like for you. And that's going to take about 20 minutes, and then I think we hand the deck over to Amanda. And Amanda's going to dive in a little deeper as regards to what Nonlinear with SickKids Foundation built on the core platform and how that ties into the concept of personalization driving greater results for the foundation itself. So we have a really great group. We're almost 50, 60 people on the line, so looking forward to some really great questions. And if you could just write those questions down, we'll get to those hopefully with some time to spare. With that, Mark, we're going to get us started.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm going to interrupt for... Oh, sorry, for 1 second. Regarding questions, Shannon, you just prompted me. There is a spot in the webinar panel where you can ask questions. So if you use that area there, we can have a look when the session's done and answer them. Sorry, Mark, go ahead.
No problem. Very excited at the opportunity to share the SickKids Foundation story and the journey that we've been on. As Shannon mentioned, this concept of a digital customer experience management hub is one that we're definitely looking at. How do we maximize now that we have Sitecore in place? So I'll take you through a bit of a story. I thought it would be useful to give you context to start out. So what I'm hoping to share is a bit of an overview of the journey that we've been on in digital and continue to be on, how we actually went about enabling our digital hub and our website being the first key expression of that using Sitecore. And then a little bit about some of the insights, some of the things we're starting to think about as we look at evolving our donor experience using some of the capabilities of the Sitecore platform. So in terms of, I thought it would be useful to give a little bit of context. I don't want to spend a ton of time, but a little bit of context as to where this fits into our overall digital journey at SickKids. So really, the journey we're on, and many others are on, we're not the only ones, began, I would say, probably in earnest about 4 years ago. And that's where certainly we were doing things in digital well before that. But it's really the time when the organization looked at digital as really being a key priority, and we really initiated digital as a priority. So the work that happened really was around looking at current digital, looking at some our strengths, gaps, looking at us relative to some of our nonprofit competitors, if you will, in the market, and establishing a bit of a baseline for where we were starting from. That work really helped establish the basis for a 3-year plan. So that really centered around getting our house in order. We focused on establishing, creating a foundation in the places that we'd really already declared ourselves. So even before we start to talk about all of these things we could be doing in digital, we had a presence in terms of a website. We had a presence in terms of a social media footprint. So how do we actually make that experience more cohesive, focused on being more donor-centric? At the time, there was limited consistency in how you actually navigated through that experience. And that led to the launch of a renewed website, which we'll talk about a little bit more in a second, powered by SiteCore. As I mentioned at the outset, we're all, I think, on this digital journey, and one of the things that we've realized is there really is no end state. There is no destination. So with that in mind, there's quite a bit of work that is in progress now to build on that foundation that was established. So we're looking at how do we get more sophisticated in terms of our analytics and being able to tap into some of the insights that then a platform like SiteCore can help us actually take action on and lead to the business results. We're looking at folding in more of our, we tend to take a microsite approach to how we rolled out campaigns or platforms or different programs, folding those into the SiteCore platform. We're looking at a donation flow and form renewal. So our current donation flow, which is not part of what we looked at sort of 2 years ago, is now part of what we're focusing our attention on and making that more streamlined. There's also work that's going on around, PCI, credit card, data security, and castle compliance, and really starting to build for a more sophisticated approach to how we actually serve up the donor experience, things like A/B testing and looking at behaviors and being able to act on them. That's a little bit about kind of the journey that we've been on, and what I wanted to talk about next is just specifically one of the significant gaps that we identified early on was our website, and really the need to improve the donor experience as well as our ability to manage the content and the donor experience ongoing. So from a website perspective, our journey towards this customer experience management approach consisted of moving from our website, which you see on the left-hand side, which was really a static website. It literally hand-coded HTML. We had an in-house developed content management system that allowed us to manage certain areas that were changing on an ongoing basis, like the home page. There was probably about 3,000 pages, and maybe I'm being conservative there. It's probably even more than that, of content. Much of it was outdated once we actually started to sift through it. And also non-mobile friendly. So the site was not developed to be mobile friendly or work for a mobile donor. And at the time, we were starting to see mobile take off as a percentage of our traffic. So all that to say, the exercise we undertook, and I'll get into more details around this, but what you see on the right-hand side is really the website post-launch with SiteCore, so really that start of our digital hub. And we look at it as a hub for a number of reasons. One, it's been developed in a way that's very modular and componentized, so we can roll out components to different pages, to different digital experiences. It's very easily updatable, and I'll touch on that in a little bit more detail. It's responsive. It really acts as our digital experience content repository. And then it now gives us the ability to really, and this is what we're most excited about, I think, as we go forward, the ability to personalize and test, which, again, in our old world was a very, very labor-intensive static approach. We now have that ability to do that a little bit more dynamically. That's a little bit of context for kind of where we've been, where we've come to. And I thought I'd talk a little bit more about what were some of our objectives when we looked at creating this digital hub, or the website initially, using Sitecore. So we did have some key objectives that led us to what we ended up launching. One was to support the communications needs of all departments across the foundation. So SickKids Foundation we are divided into 4 key areas: fundraising, major gifts, corporate events, and our mass donors. So anything we were creating needed to support communications across the board and not just serve the needs of one of those areas. Ultimately, we wanted something that would enable various departments to manage their own content over time within very specific guidelines and governance. And we've actually been successful in doing that, where we started to roll out slowly the ability to other departments, to like our events team, for example, to manage very specific content within areas of our website, where previously that would have all been centralized with our technology group. Another one of our key objectives was to start to gather data from donor behavior and site analytics to help deepen the donor engagement. So looking at how donors are actually experiencing the website and using that information to do something, to alter their behavior. I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing or what we're starting to think about there. Provide better donor support online. So really this is about reducing friction, getting people to the information they're looking for as quickly as possible, and ultimately reducing things like calls to our support teams and call centers. And then probably most importantly, this notion of scalability. So at the time, and certainly even today, we know digital is constantly evolving. There are always new digital touch points that are going to be rolling out, some of which we may not even know today. So whatever we wanted to put in place, we knew had to be scalable over time and allow us to adapt to where digital is going. So the desired outcomes and how we kind of touch on the results associated with these. So more control. So we wanted to have less of a need to rely solely on a specific group of resources with coding abilities, really, to create, edit, and publish content. We wanted to get closer to this notion of real-time publishing. So when content is ready to go, or if something happens that requires us to update something, we can do that faster. Will give us better relevance, timeliness with our content. We wanted to be able to have control over the workflow, so facilitate collaboration and distribution with a solid creation, approval, and publishing workflow. Lower our operating costs over time, so the time we were spending on web maintenance and updating content through some of the simplification. And then again, ultimately, we exist to raise funds for the Hospital for Sick Children. It's all about increasing conversion, and that may not be conversion through to donation. That may be conversion through to other tasks, signing up to host an event, for example. But ultimately, all of this is to impact donor behaviors, prospective donor behaviors. So some of the results we have seen, we've certainly been able to distribute the ability to perform content updates. We now have 3 teams within the organization who have the ability to update content, where previously it was 1, and it was really centralized with people who had, like I said, the ability to code, not necessarily the focus on the information and being able to get it into the system. We also have a governance model in place with a monthly update schedule that's coordinated through the marketing team. So there's a call that goes out every month, and content is gathered, it's organized, there's a calendar where content is organized around themes on a monthly basis. So all of that is now governed with some documented processes. And then back to, at the end of the day, it's about conversion. We did see significant lift in our site e-commerce conversion post-launch, which most importantly to us, that's a key measure that we keep an eye on. That trend continues today. So I think the number that was quoted, and I'll share this next slide, we saw the old site, sort of pre-April of 2014, we saw an e-commerce conversion rate of 0.34%. An industry average that we tend to use as a benchmark from N10 in the States is about 0.67. I think that's actually gone up to 0.8, if I recall the number from the latest survey or study. So we were up almost fourfold on that number post-launch. And interestingly, as I mentioned earlier, we really hadn't touched, and still are in the process of working on our donation flow. So this is really about people getting to the information and getting through to those key tasks on the front end, call it, in the most efficient way possible. That's really driving this this early engagement number. Exciting for us because, like I said, we're just scratching the surface, we feel, when it comes to being able to impact donor behaviors when they come to the site. And with that in mind, I wanted to touch on talking a little bit about where we see the next evolution of our donor experience using Sitecore. So we really started by looking at the opportunity of, what is the data telling us? Where can we identify areas we can focus our efforts on to influence desired behaviors? And then start to make use of Sitecore's digital marketing system to really implement and test those hypotheses. And I will say at the outset, we have started to put the foundation in place for the DMS. We have not yet fully implemented a test with DMS, but I'll walk you through some of the hypotheses we've started to toss around in terms of things we would want to test. So the first area we looked at is some of the behavior in terms of types of content people are visiting and the number of times they visit that particular content. So if you look on the left-hand side, you just see a breakdown of all the sort of sections of the site, the pages, and then across the top you can see, who's coming to the site to see that content on a third visit, a fourth visit, 8 times plus visits. And some numbers are starting to pop out here in terms of areas where we thought there could be opportunity, specifically around some of the behaviors from a corporate partner. If you look down the list and across the right, you'll see that we're over-indexing in terms of people who are coming into the corporate partner content 4+ times. So there's something about that behavior that we might want to tap into. Similarly, if you look at some of the behavior around events, so people are coming, 8+ times around event information. Again, not something that we might serve up to everyone front and center all the time, but is there something we could be doing that taps into that behavior? So just highlighting some of the numbers that we started to see and some of the insights that we were starting to tap into. Then looking at things like the traffic volume by business line. So the vast majority of visits are people who are outside of our major giving and corporate giving lines of business. So collectively, building a legacy, corporate giving and major gifts make up less than 1%. However, interestingly, if you look at those of traffic, if you look at those 3 areas from a page views, they are some of the top page views per session areas of content. So what does this mean for us and for the DMS? We looked at this as, there's an opportunity potentially to personalize content based on visit number to drive increased conversions. And because of that high return rate from this group, personalization has the potential to improve potentially outcomes for these 3 groups: major giving, corporate partners, and people who are looking to leave a legacy gift. So a potential implementation for us, just to bring it to life in terms of an example, how do we profile visitors who spend time in the corporate partner section of the site to then potentially personalize the hero image on the homepage on their return? And then look at what the bounce rate is for that segment over time. So again, we wouldn't necessarily front and center when you come to the site have a corporate partner call to action However, if we can personalize that for a group that we know is spending a lot of time looking at corporate partner information, what's the behavior that we could change there? Can we get them to call us or sign up to have a corporate representative get back to them? Similarly, I talked about events and visitors with 8+ visits being more likely to be seeking events. So how do we then take a look at personalizing for them in a way that the message around getting involved, hosting your own event, is again front and center. Not something that we would do for everyone, but again something we would do through personalization. And then just another example in terms of some of our major pages and some of the traffic volume. So looking at A/B testing potential, if you look on the right-hand side in the chart, the pages that we might look to A/B test on, and then in terms of the traffic we're seeing, the months of A/B testing that we need to run to be statistically valid, there are clearly some that jump right to the top, the home page being one of them, one of the key ones. So one of the things we look at is, can we look at focusing some A/B tests on some of those highest volume pages, like the home page, or a donation page in the process, or clubs, which is one of our signature events, cocktail party, or other event-specific microsites. So again here, just a potential implementation to bring it to life. Do we look at our donate button as an opportunity for A/B testing and look to test different sizes of the donate button? And then we would evaluate against the number of clicks on donate for each one of those versions that we test. And we would do that for approximately 1 to 3 months, given the volume that we need to be statistically significant. So again, another area, and just one example of some of the things that we are starting to think about in terms of use of the DMS. So where are we today? We have started to ramp up and train key team members internally to be certified on Sitecore DMS, as well as just Sitecore in general. We are also rolling out a digital roadmap for 2016-2017, and one of the things that's emerging from there is, some of the desired outcomes lend themselves really well to where we might use Sitecore ongoing in terms of, continuing to be a preferred brand when it comes to donations. Certainly, some of the things we've talked about in terms of consistency of experience, in terms of sophistication of the experience, that all lends to the brand image and brand integrity. Growth in revenue. So when we talk about things like testing and streamlining our donation funnels, there's certainly opportunity there. Best-in-class donor experience, which is something that we always aspire to. When you talk about reducing friction, making it as easy as possible for a donor, that's definitely an area that, again, lends itself to Sitecore. And then operational excellence. So I think we are just starting to scratch the surface when it comes to how we can really look at this as a tool that can be distributed and used across the organization. And then ultimately, we're looking to integrate the evolution of our now digital hub into this digital roadmap ongoing. So that's a little bit of snapshot of where we've come from and where we're going to. And with that, I will hand it over to Amanda.
Muted. Unmuted.
Great.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me, Shannon?
Yep, you're good, Amanda.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here. Let me know when you can see somebody running.
See someone about to embark on a run.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much, Mark. That was great. What I want to do now is sort of build on what Mark has described in terms of the work we've done together and hope to do at SickKids, and broaden it a little bit to talk about CXM platforms such as Sitecore, which we work with, and some of the other areas of value that can be added in the nonprofit context. So I'm going to start just by, when we talk to our nonprofit clients these days, they are facing a number of interesting challenges. Hang on, there we go. So it's a more crowded space than ever. I think I read a statistic that there's over 2,600 new charities started in Canada every year alone. So everybody's looking for donations, attention, etc. Everybody's doing 5Ks. It's a challenge to make yourself heard amongst all of that, and promote your cause. The traditional funnel for donations is very much disrupted by new online channels. I'll talk a little bit more about that. There is really specific donor segmentation and behavior that happens by generation, which is kind of a given if you think about contrasting, boomers versus Generation X versus Generation Y, and the way that they interact and do things. So that is an opportunity. There's the idea of donor lifetime relationships. So nonprofits are not just considering a one-way funnel to one conversion point, but really nurturing a lifelong relationship with people, and considering them as they age through different generations. And of course, like almost every sector, marketing teams within nonprofits need to do more with less. They have tight budgets and tight constraints on resourcing. So there's a really interesting article, if you haven't read it, it's in the Stanford Social Innovation Review, published in 2013, and it talks about the total disruption that social media has caused within donor engagement models. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the more traditional linear pyramid model, which starts with a very broad, impersonal, low-touch start in a relationship with an individual, and then nurtures it up towards a highly personalized relationship with the endpoint being a donation or conversion. And what they've proposed is this vortex model on the right-hand side, where it's much more important to consider influence, engagement, and communications across multiple channels. And this is not linear, this is not just a one-time occurrence, but it's across a lifetime. So what you look for in a tool is the ability to meet what are the opportunities to work within the vortex model. And that's kind of the context I'm going to use within my slides here. A few important points here. It's varying and fluid. You don't enter in one place and end in another spot. You can enter in any number of spots. There's no fixed endpoint. There was an interesting point that there's this idea of slacktivism, where people if they just like something, or if they do something that's small or passive, is it as valuable? And in fact, people that engage on social media are equally as likely to do activities such as volunteering or donating. So there's no sort of direct linear mapping we can make there. And most importantly, the third point here, which is influencing of other people. So there's some statistics I have in here, but it's very powerful when your friend tells you to donate. That actually has a huge impact. So there is a fruitful intersection between the vortex and the points of opportunity within the vortex, and the specific tactics and tools that you have at your fingertips in a platform such as Sitecore. So I'll pause for a second and explain a few acronyms. So CXM, Customer Experience Management, really we're talking here about, let me do my bullets here. Sitecore XP is a CXM. The XP comes from Experience Platform. And really what this is typically you'll have your traditional CMS publishing capabilities, and then you'll also have a certain amount of marketing features, and most recently this ability to manage a customer's experience much more closely in real time, react to things that are happening right now, and really nurture the leads much more closely than before. So that's a simplified explanation of what we mean by this acronym. Sitecore versions. So some of you on the line may already be Sitecore customers, and if you are probably in one of these three major versions, 6, 7, or 8. The good news is that DMS, which is the digital marketing system, it got rebranded as XP, but it is the same set of features that do evolve through these versions. If you're on 6.5 or above, you do have access to a lot of the features we're talking about. You can test, you can personalize, etc. 7.5, we saw the introduction of a new collection database, and then 8, we have a next generation of XP features. So if you can situate yourself within there, you'll have opportunities across the board, no matter where you are with your upgrade path. And the final side note is a little bit of helpful framing. So when we work with our clients and get them going with a CXM campaign, how do we use Sitecore DMS XP? How do we get the most out of it? We usually frame it as quick wins versus things that need more investment. So some of what Mark referenced there was some really, really great ideas for SickKids Foundation in terms of quick wins. I'll expand them here. Rules-based personalization, so information you have at your fingertips already. So personalizing on visit number, personalizing on geography, doing some simple A/B testing on conversion points, on form submissions, engagement plans, which is a feature of Sitecore that emulates drip marketing, so you can nurture leads in an automated fashion. And I'll contrast that with these things on the right-hand side. They're over here on the right-hand side because they are ultimately, they give you a higher ROI, they have a high effectiveness, but they do require some upfront strategic legwork. So if you want to do profile-based personalization, you do need to put some thought into your audiences and how you're going to profile your content in order to assemble a profile based on behavior, because it's entirely driven on making assumptions based on what they're browsing to pages and actions that you're taking. Another example here is explicit personalization. If you integrate with your CRM, we can also personalize on explicitly known characteristics, demographics, etc. So that's usually how we frame this, and almost always we get clients started on the left-hand side so that they can get comfortable with the DMS and then move forward from there. So I see 4 great opportunities in this fruitful intersection I mentioned. So using this new vortex model and donor engagement value as a threshold that we can use for marketing decisions and automation, we can get some fantastic insights into audience behavior. We can absolutely get some quick wins at key points of optimization, and I'll share a couple of case studies there. And it's also a really timely opportunity to look at the tools that you have, the marketing technology tools. One of the most common questions we get is, do I need all of these different marketing platforms that I have? Can I streamline them? Can one of them do everything? It's another great question to ask, and I think as these platforms expand to be able to do more and more, it's an evaluation that's probably fairly unique to each organization. So what's engagement value? This is something I'm going to spend a bit of time on because it's really, really central to Sitecore's value as a platform, and they've really baked it in throughout the product. So the idea here is that not all visitors are equal. Your basic analytics you might look at would be traffic volume, bounce rate. Are you looking at those things improving? If you can look at visitors in terms of the actions that they take and whether those are more valuable or less valuable to your organization, you can actually build a scale. This is for B2B, but as you can see here, it's a relative weighting that you can place on things that someone does on your website, and as they start to research, as they warm up through the sales cycle or conversion cycle, they'll build a higher and higher engagement value for themselves, and then, as I mentioned, we can use that value to trigger various things. So I'm going to reference a couple of articles that I found really interesting. I've got the links at the end, but what I found interesting, this one is from a Blackbaud report. They did an evaluation of donor behavior, one for Canada, one for the US. But what really stood out was this difference in generational behavior. So that's sort of one really important input to consider when looking at this donor engagement value model you might build. There's certainly a big divide in terms of engagement channels, and those are both online and offline there. And then, of course, between the generations, which ones are most popular. And then inside of the Stanford report, they actually did a little bit of a quadrant grid in terms of assessing value of various things. And again, these are spanning online and offline, but you can start to see how they've incorporated both level of involvement or engagement, but also level of influence. So as you're ranking things in terms of value to your organization, this is sort of a holistic view of how you can consider not just that linear flow, but that vortex flow. So I would highly recommend looking at these things as an input to your considerations. So once you've done this strategic legwork on donor engagement value, what are the actual value add tactics you can get out of Sitecore, your CXM platform? So number one is just data, plain and simple. With a raw database, so Sitecore in the latest version uses Mongo. It collects every single interaction that possibly happens on your site. You can even have it collect activity off your site on a site that's not on Sitecore. And you can just imagine the possible insights that you could get after, say, 3 months of data collection. If you have a properly instrumented value model, and especially if you cross-reference to your audience segmentation and have a look at what your personas are doing, and also how that correlates to engagement value. And I actually have an example of, we did that a few years ago with another client, and I can show you exactly what I mean here. But this is probably one of the most powerful things that you can get. Like I said before, you can use it as a threshold. So for example, personalization. If someone has gotten to a certain level of engagement, you can personalize on that. So if you're looking to drive forward an emotional connection or a quality of service, you can have the content on your site target specifically to those individuals and push them towards those behaviors. The engagement plan inside of Sitecore is a feature that you can have a trigger on submitting a form or on any action taken, really, as long as you collect an email address somehow from an anonymous browser. Incorporating the engagement value here as well lets you tailor your automated communications a little bit more. So again, the nurturing someone who's really just starting a relationship with you versus someone who has that long-term life cycle relationship. This is a useful tool where you can really start to tailor those communications. Filter on individuals for lead nurturing. So this is a cool new feature. This is in Sitecore 7, 5, and 8. It's called the experience profile. So the idea is you can actually look and filter and examine individuals' behavior. There's a report that you can get. So it's not applicable to every single organization. I think it has a really interesting use case specifically in the nonprofit sector because you may, as you look at nurturing not only your donors who are doing significant donations, for whom you might even have a separate team who's managing them and contacting them directly, but also going back to the Vortex model, influencers and online ambassadors. So if you have very, very vocal supporters, they might also meet your criteria for getting a little bit of personal attention, a phone call, for example. Here's my quote from Salsa Labs. So the peer influence is really, really significant. And just to give you a quick visual, it's probably a bit hard to read, but this is giving you a sense of this. This is a 360-degree view of the customer that Sitecore talks about. And really the idea here is that if you can find an individual and if you can actually filter in the screen on value. So if you do value descending, you will be able to see the people who, if you've instrumented your value in a good way, you can find those individuals who are probably worth having a chat with or connecting with in some way. And in this detailed report, you can get a sense of absolutely everything that they've done, campaigns, activity, profiling, behaviors, last contact, etc. It's even more powerful if you integrate it with your CRM and pull some of that information into. So that's a really good opportunity. And finally, with Sitecore 8, we can persist engagement value. We can persist the idea of one customer record across channels and across time. So with this latest version, we can handle the messiness of the Vortex model in a lot more of a clean way. So whether you're coming in through your desktop, your phone, a year from now, the platform is much better able to keep that all together as this one big picture of this constituent and then your ability to act on that. Secondly, so understanding and influencing audience segments. This is our work with the National Wildlife Federation. It's a couple years old now, but we did something really interesting with them, and this was with an older version of the Sitecore DMS. We can tie insight on audience segmentation intimately to content because this is directly related to profiling your content. So for example, they had 6 personas at the time that are listed here, and what we did is we took the top 100 pages of traffic, highest traffic pages, and we actually divvied them up into these categories so that people could be identified by what they were looking at. And you can see what I'm getting at, whereby your content strategy actually starts to become important here, because if you're thinking of content being used as a way to segment, it is probably a big input into how you're actually doing your information architecture. But what we ultimately ended up doing was finding out some really interesting observations about what these personas were doing on the site. So for example, this is the total number of sessions as the highest scoring persona. So we have a lot of visitors identifying as wildlife enthusiasts and parent caregivers. An equally valid question is, is what your content is targeting lining up with your organizational goals? We also looked at who's spending the longest on the site. So it looks like educators are spending longer on the site, even though they do not represent a big part of the traffic. And then why, for example, why do outdoor activity seekers hit the highest number of pages? They're spending a lot of time on the site. They're looking at more things than others. So lots of really interesting observations and questions. And one of the outputs of this exercise was whether we could get high traffic visitors to sort of transition to more engaged visitors. So a wildlife enthusiast, can we get that person to sort of take a step forward and engage a little more and actually become an outdoor activity participant, for example? So that was really, really interesting, and that's an example of the insights you can get from Sitecore collecting this kind of data and you having access to crunch it. The opportunity here is really these 4 things. Once you've understood some of the patterns, then you can actually also personalize to those patterns. So, if it's a wildlife enthusiast, promote this content, promote this activity, etc. One interesting thing I noticed, again, as I was going through the reports, age does play a really strong role in the way that donors engage. So if you can also think of your content strategy as a way to segment your audience based on generation, and yes, you'll be making some assumptions, but it might be good enough in order for you to move the needle a little bit there. Another example, this one's from the Black Bod report, really nice view of different behaviors. So this is just an example, but it might be a way that you can consider tagging your content in order to distinguish between generations based on their behavior as a rough inference. A quick bonus, if you are on Sitecore 8 or if you're moving to Sitecore 8, this is nicely built into the reports. So when we worked with the National Wildlife Federation, we were actually exporting into Excel and crunching with SQL. One of the nice things about 8, which I'll just share with you quickly here, is that the pattern matching is built right into the reporting interface. So in this site, I have different traveler personas. You see family and adventurous here, and I can actually see some of this summary information broken down by persona. And down here, I can see, you know, value per visit, how long they're staying on the site. So some of the same things we saw with the other case study, but it's built in now, which is really, really nice. Thirdly, optimizing the donor journey. So some of what Mark spoke to is really, really good examples of those quick win optimizations. They really do make a difference. They work. One of our best case studies is with Rotman School of Management here in University of Toronto. And you can look at this as, you know, where can you optimize? And Mark spoke to this too, but those high traffic areas and then also your most influential points within the vortex. These do make a big difference, and they also help within your team promoting a culture of optimization. So the Rotman example, we did some really easy geography-based personalization. So they were really trying to promote international students applying from India, for example. They got their own landing page when they browsed in from India. And we actually saw some significant lift out of this experiment. So bounce rate reduced, visit duration increased, and amount of pages per visit increased. So there's the business ROI right there. It's something that we've been able to see an improvement with every client that we've worked with. So the point here is that if you've got the platform power and you've got limited time, people, resources, there are really small tweaks that you can make that do make a difference. And finally, my last point, evaluating platforms, it's a really timely question. This is the infamous Scott Brinker's landscape diagram that he puts out every year, and every year it gets more and more sort of mind-blowing. But there's an incredible number of tools on the market, and most organizations will be using at least 3 or 4 of them. The question that I would recommend you ask is what does give you that most effective full view of the customer that you can act on? So things to look at, lead attribution, how thoroughly is online activity captured, ability to integrate. So it's really common, for example, to have your CXM platform and your CRM side by side. So Sitecore, for example, is really moving towards a provider model for e-commerce, for CRM, for other things. So that ability to plug and play between the most popular platforms is really, really coming to the forefront, which is fantastic because it just makes this seamless customer flow really, really easy and less costly to implement. Ability to take action, ability to identify segments, influencers, and finally ability to measure effectiveness. And these are all things that that should be considered when looking at CXM and not just sort of CMS capabilities individually or just marketing, looking at all of this holistically. A common model that we see is the central platform, for example, Sitecore, serving the main web properties, seamless with an asterisk because there's always integration work, but the conversion flowing nicely into the CRM or the Convio or Blackbot or whatever you use for donors. Email marketing driven from the contact system of record. It could be the CRM, it could be Sitecore. Centralized campaign tracking. So this is again where something like Sitecore is nice because you can track and personalize on campaigns that come in from your AdWords and flow right through to your CRM. And also a way to extend tracking reach. So Google put out their universal analytics. Sitecore has FXM, it's another acronym, Federated Experience Manager, which lets you track activity on sites that are not served by Sitecore. So these systems are becoming really, really powerful to be able to address a lot of this. This is another example where journey maps are useful to map it out. This is fairly high level, it's just an example, but Embraer executive jets, we did map out a high level, it's fairly linear, but it's a high level journey map from pre-sales to post-delivery. And looking at something like that is really where you can start to map out what technology is used for each part and making sure the transitions are seamless. So in conclusion, given this disruption of the engagement model, I would say evaluate the platform capabilities within the context that I spoke about here, we've really seen concrete evidence that the right tool can stretch your resources farther and bring higher ROI. There are real value adds that you can see, measure, promote up the chain, use as a business case to upgrade or to buy a tool, and opportunities abound. So within the Vortex, there are many, many ways to reach out to donors, influencers at any point in their life cycle. And this is one of the most compelling, I think, arguments for a CXM platform and its capabilities. So that's it. Thank you very much. I've provided the links to those articles here on the right-hand side and our Twitter accounts on the left. So I will see whether there's any questions. I think there's just one question. Hang on. Is DMS part of Sitecore 8? The answer is yes. It's just been renamed to Experience Platform. So when you hear Sitecore DMS, it's typically referring to version 6 and 7. And the latest version of it is called Sitecore XP.
Actually, Amanda, Shannon here. I have a question for Mark, and I actually have one for you as well.
Sure.
Mark, I was intrigued to hear you say and start off the conversation on 2 points. One is, the data side, which, as you know, is near and dear to nonlinear's heart in terms of having that data as a premise. How data sophisticated when you began this process was SickKids Foundation? And the second part of my question is the fact that you actually also called it a journey. This recognition that doing an engagement like this is not a project. It doesn't have a start or a finish. It has sort of an ongoing sort of arc to it. How difficult was that to sell internally?
Oh, I think we might hang
Sorry.
on.
Yep, there.
I think I was on mute.
There we go.
Yep, you're good.
I'm back. So on the first question around data sophistication, I would say there was and continues to be pockets of data knowledge within the organization. I think the opportunity that we're working through is how do you connect all those data points? We are capturing information in the marketing space, tools like Google Analytics, et cetera. We're doing data analysis when it comes to crunching through our CRM database and information we're getting there, and how do you connect all of those things together? So I would say, we are getting more sophisticated. I think the journey, to touch on that point, it's something that it's constantly evolving. I think the notion of selling that into the organization, that there is no final destination, possibly 3 or 4 years ago, there was a thought that we'd get to an end point where we can kind of take our focus off digital and focus on other things. I think the organization is coming to the realization that we are constantly evolving. We're constantly, the buzzword these days in digital is the pivot, right? We'll put something in place. In fact, even with the CMS system, before we landed on Sitecore, we actually had landed on another system. We actually physically installed it and piloted it and realized very quickly this is not what we want to be doing. Pivoted and ended up with Sitecore. So it's being willing as an organization to have that kind of a culture, and that is a journey unto itself.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's a difficult one for some organizations to get over than others. That idea that it is a constantly evolving landscape. And one that is extremely difficult, especially today, to predict the future. And it's one where being lean, mean, and agile is definitely the way to go. That was great, Mark. Thank you. Amanda, question for you. In terms of where we see our clients normally beginning with some sort of personalization engagement plan, what's that normally look like?
Yeah, so when we work with clients, we do what we call an accelerator engagement. And usually what it consists of is a campaign that focuses on an immediate business need, for example. So usually we'll work with them to map out their customer journey flow and what their what an immediate goal they have is. So it might be as simple as just increasing conversions in a particular area, or something more specific than that. Typically what we're seeing, typically the campaigns that we're running are comprised of what Mark spoke to. So a couple of A/B tests that can move the needle. And one of the challenges in older versions of Sitecore is the A/B testing is a little more limited than it is in 8. So usually we might only run a couple of those at a time to be able to see the results. So we'll pick a very high traffic flow, because again, the statistical significance is important. And we'll just test simple things, like we'll test a button color, we'll test text, and we'll really use the analytics to inform where those optimization points are. And we also usually find somewhere between 10 and 20 personalization rules that can be tried out. And again, you want to keep that manageable, so maybe start with 5 or 10. But when we think about those quick wins, so geography, visit number, date, anything like that that's sort of at your fingertips, that's where we're getting those easy first steps that do show the first results.
That's great. One of the things that I think is exciting about working specifically for not-for-profits is that their goal scenario are relatively clear and concise. It's very obvious, and specifically for SickKids Foundation, that driving that donor side of the equation was one of those key metrics that we can face on. It's a little bit more challenging and ambiguous when you have B2B clients or clients who are a little bit fuzzy with regards to what do they want their website to do, what are the outcomes and key sort of points that we can look to drive those conversions. And that's kind of step one for many of our clients, to make sure they have clarity around what do you want people to do. 2 quick questions here before we sign off. Matt has asked, curious to know how customer profiles are tracked persistently over time. Cookies, login?
Yeah, so it used to be cookies, which was a challenge because if you came in through different devices, it wasn't easy to link those together as the same person. There's still a little bit of work to do in 8 to make that happen, but the big innovation there is the shared session. So if you do come back and you can be identified in some way, whether it is a cookie or whether it's a login, there's a little bit of code you can add to actually link those sessions together much more easily than before, and make sure that if you've got 6 CD servers load balanced, that this shared session state can be accessed by all of them, so you have a much easier time of linking things together. So not perfect, but much closer to an ideal state would be my answer there. Second question here is, do people ask to sign in for you to pile up their information? So some of the screenshots I showed there were known users, so you saw some names and some pictures. In those cases, absolutely, it's only when we have a login, a known user, and likely a CRM when we can have that kind of information. When someone is browsing anonymously, we don't have that, but we are collecting info, and some would argue that there's an ethical line there, but that's basically how it works. We can't collect anything more than what anonymous browsing gives us.
Yeah, and I would add that the privacy side of the equation is something that is very clearly spelled out, and there's a very specific guidelines in place. And specifically when we're talking to anonymous users, we're truly talking to anonymous users, just making sort of mass and general assumptions around the types of data that you might be looking at, and nothing is specific about the individual. So this was excellent, Mark. Thank you very much. Amanda, thank you very much. As everyone can see on the screen, contact information is available there. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions regarding this. We would love to hear from you, and I hope that everyone has a fantastic remainder of the day. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.